All right. Hello, folks. So we're just getting started here. This is another one of our Learn With Me episodes. We're going to be looking at ChatGPT today, and specifically ChatGPT relative to infrastructure as code. And of course, for that, then you probably want to start out with some basic things like having access to a compute resource, so and possibly even an application. So I've got a quick, I've got a little app over here that I built earlier. It's ChatGPT app even, and the funny thing is I built it with ChatGPT, and that's a whole nother discussion that we can also have, and maybe even we'll continue it on from wherever we get to today. The whole idea with these Learn With Me's is that much like most of us, I'm trying to figure this stuff out as well, and I've got some experience, and so I can apply that, and hopefully that's applicable to you as well. But we're going to sort of figure out some of these bits and pieces as we go along. So the idea is that we have this app, and we'd like to get it to a position where we could run it and make it exposed and accessible. Actually, the bigger application that we'll probably look at building over time through maybe even this exact same process is I really want to be able to take Git commits and pass them through ChatGPT. I think that kind of, whether it's ChatGPT, the OpenAI model, or Amazon just announced a new AI capability that you can actually leverage in much the same way. Regardless of what the path is, I think that the tooling is really useful for making things more understandable. And this is a good example. I know I want to do something like create a Flask application and get it launched. How do I do that? I can ask ChatGPT, and I can ask ChatGPT in the ChatGPT view, right? So this same message that I had here, this app's currently not running, so this is just a previous result. But building out an application that does this is exactly the kind of thing that I think most of us want to build and then want to figure out how we run. The building part is the first part of it. Certainly you have to be able to build an application, but there are lots of tutorials online, and then of course there's the whole ChatGPT service for doing this. But what I really find useful is taking this to the next step. One of the frustrations I've always had with the ChatGPT service is this kind of interface where it's like, hey, and it's the app I built is effectively this, right? I'm going to ask you a question, and it's going to go ahead and spit out an answer. Hey, that's pretty cool. That basically gets me going. You'll notice that this result is not the same as this result, and yet they're the exact same question. And this is one of the potentially frustrating things. The ChatGPT system is built, at least this particular interface, the chatopenai.com interface, is really built to inform you and instruct you on how things work and how they interact. And it's really useful, right? It gives you not just the example code, which is what I was actually looking for, but it also gives you some instructions about what you need to do and what things you might need to think about in order to actually make this really work. And here we can see we've got a pretty decent Docker file that you could build, and that would build an application, assuming that you have a couple things. It mentions that you probably need to have an app. So this file, app.py, which is what it tells the Python service to run, needs to exist. You also need to have the requirements.txt file, which lists the packages that, in this case, this is a Python application. Python's the language I'm most familiar with, so that's the one I tend to use. So how do you go about doing that? But to me, the next step in all of this is how in the world do I actually get into an environment, a cloud environment, and actually start running things. And the first thing that we need to do is get ChatGPT to help us build out an infrastructure model, right? So, how would I go about doing that? Well, let's create a new chat here. We'll stick with the 3.5 model because I actually do have access. I did pay for the plus version just because it's a little faster. I do have access to GPT-4, but you only get a couple queries per hour, and I think I'd burn through those and then we'd be stuck. So we'll stick with 3.5, which I think is actually just fine. And actually, yeah, the speed, the speed they say is super fast. Well, let's test it, right? So the first thing I want to do is, make sure that my environment is set up correctly. So, I've already done a couple of things. I have 1Password installed. I think that regardless of how you do things, you have to have a secrets manager available to you. copying and pasting keys is still possible even with a secrets manager, but if you can do it from a command line, it makes it even that much better. And then, of course, we need to start thinking about how we interact with our cloud. So in the case of Amazon, we have Amazon Cloud Services, but there are also some really powerful tools to make AWS cloud interactions even easier. The one that I really like is called AWS Vault, and actually, I don't think I've installed that. Yes, I don't have AWS Vault installed yet, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm pretty sure it's under brew, but I can never remember. Brew AWS Vault install. I mean, this is the old way of looking things up, right? It's like, how do you get there from here? And we can just grab this, run this in our shell, and look at that. We're off and running. All right, looks like it's building out. So yes, I installed Brew. I installed 1Password. I also installed the 1Password client. And that's really useful because then you can map that into scripts to actually launch things from scripts. Also very useful for things like AWS, logging into AWS. So now we have Vault installed. That's actually really powerful. But the other thing that we need is an AWS CLI. We need, for example, Terraform and a Terraform CLI. And all of these things are tools that we would end up installing much like AWS Vault. I actually find that when I can, I like to use Docker containers for all of these different applications. And to that end, I even went and built a container just to make life easier. This is all preamble stuff, right? This isn't even getting to ChatGPT helping, but in order to have ChatGPT do anything for us, we have to actually set up some of these default services and default capabilities. So AWS Vault is one, and that's good, but I still need to be able to then run the AWS CLI. And again, you can do this a number of different ways. What I've actually done is built a little tools container, and then I even stored it on Docker Hub so that I can always get to it. So I can do Docker pull. In this case, it's rstarmer is the account, because that's just the account I put it under. And then we had, I think I just called it tools. And looks like that's right. So this is one part of the puzzle. And the other part, of course, is that then I want some way to launch this tool, because the tool binary is basically just another container of a bunch of applications. And so, yes, I can log into that container, but I'm also going to want to basically create some aliases to make my life easier. And so I need to go find those aliases. And if I recall, I actually have them on a different machine. And I'm just gonna grab them from here. So the key ones that I care about are really Terraform and AWS. And so I'm gonna grab those. So this is an alias to set up AWS to run. So it uses Docker, and it uses my rstarmer tools repository, and it runs the user local bin AWS code. And the other one that I thought was interesting was Terraform. So I'll grab this from over here. And we can alias Terraform. And actually, I'm going to go one step further, and that is, let's see, I'm going to do echo this entire thing to Z shell resources, and then we're going to cat that just real quick. Yeah, see, this is the tricky thing. What you really want is that alias to include the expansions, the shell expansions, as a part of the alias. So we're going to have to do this slightly differently. Z shell RC, and then we also want to do the same thing for Terraform, our Terraform alias. Okay, so now we have those aliases set. You can see the other thing I'd set was already set an AWS profile, and I created a simpler prompt because I hate the prompts that just get in the way of what we're looking at, which is really trying to do some work here. So here we have an AWS profile. In this case, it's the Cumulus admin profile. And now that is making some assumptions. That it means that I have somewhere defined a profile for AWS, and I have that. Let's see, AWS config. And I want to grab... All right, we can create a .aws directory, and we can create a config here. And in this, it doesn't help if it doesn't grab the right code. Let's try this again. Copy this. Insert's already set. Nope. Okay, so we'll try one more time here. See, I should be able to copy and then paste. So, no, it is really not going to do that for me, is it? Okay, so we'll do this another way. We're going to copy it from a different machine. So we're going to scopy. All right, so we copied that over. Yes, I want to use my key, and we're in good shape. Yeah, 1Password has become incredibly useful for keeping things secure, using the right key, sharing the right key. I mean, it's a pretty powerful tool. I really do hope that they're as secure as they appear to be, because that makes things so much easier. So what I've been trying to do is pull together the bits and pieces to allow us to take an application, and actually let me clear here. So we have an application already. We have a Docker file for it. Again, this is basically a Docker file that was created by the ChatGPT service with a couple of questions and prompts. And that's really the trick with ChatGPT is questions and prompts. And we've sort of worked through having that help us and sort of derive a set of core components. So we have our Docker file here. Hello here, yeah. We have our application, and the application has basically the ability to pull in an OpenAI API key and query the OpenAI API via their own OpenAI Python libraries. We also have a Flask application, so it basically has a little REST endpoint that it can communicate with. So there's a default one, and in this case, it's all just one default message. And then the templates index has basically a Bootstrap CSS environment, so it makes for a slightly nicer looking application. And it basically has a question query response solution, and the ability then to copy that response from the clipboard. That's basically what I was thinking was sort of the precursor to just about any kind of ChatGPT style application. We have some secrets that we have to manage, etc. Some of these pieces exist, and this is really now what we want to do. Is I've got my application, I know it works, I can run it locally, and I have a copy of the run script. I actually updated the one that I have in a GitLab repository with an actual registered Bootstrap image. So if I run this, let's see, we can actually, it should be on 8080, yeah. So we can do Docker. Actually, we can just run the script because asked it to help me create a script. Again, it's like, let's do all these things. So it just queried the 1Password API and is now starting up and running the image. It looks like, even though this is an M1 style Mac, so an ARM platform, it was able to run the AMD 64. That's the Rosetta or QEMU emulation. And then if we go back here to this app, again, I'm going to copy this query, and we can just refresh this page. And now we have our app is running. I can paste a query, and hopefully, if everything's working, I can send it and I'll get a response. And then I can copy that response, and I can do something with it. I actually didn't install VS Code, so I don't have a code editor other than VI, but that's okay. So anyway, so what we've done here is we've basically validated that our application works. Now the next question is, how do I get the ChatGPT environment to help me actually run this in the cloud? We did some AWS configuration, but I probably should have started there and just said, hey, this is great. How about okay, can you show me how to configure an AWS client to use AWS Vault and SSO credentials from AWS. It's like, it says, yeah, I can show you how to do this. Let me give you some of the key pieces of information that you need in order to run through this set of efforts. And AWS Vault is one of the solutions for this. And it says first you want to run AWS configure. Well, we've turned AWS into a container, so we can go kill this app. And if we do AWS configure, yeah, and see, we don't want to enter an access key and a secret key, because that means that I have to go find those keys and store them locally. So already I disagree with what ChatGPT is doing. It's not that it's wrong. This would technically work, but there are better ways to do it. And actually, if I do AWS SSO login, which it didn't actually suggest, is that I actually have a config already. I have a default configuration. But if I do this AWS SSO login, right, it's kind of interesting because it will give me directions for how to log in. And so we can do that here. And then we can give it the code that it asks for. Now, the reason that this works is that I have some additional information that I was not able to easily share. And that is that there is, for me, an AWS setup. Now, most people are going to have some other part of the group that's actually doing AWS SSO setup. And it's by no means a difficult thing to do. It is absolutely possible to go around and set this up and configure this. Now, the one thing that's not obvious here is that AWS is an alias. I think it's whence ens-f AWS. So AWS is this alias, and you can see that I'm mapping the .aws directory into the container so that it can be used as the secret store. And there is a cache. If I look at the AWS directory now, I only copied the config file over. SSO is new, and that's the cache for AWS. So AWS is doing the right thing. The command line tool is doing the right thing. I'm able to get credentials, and in this case, this start URL is something that you learned from either your systems administrator or as you set up the AWS single sign-on services, which is what AWS has been pushing everybody to, and trying to get away from the key and secret model, just because it's more secure. In this case, I had no local secret other than a login and a password into the AWS service that I used, and that then generated a key, and that key is good for, I think it's an hour is the way I set it up, but it can be up to, well, it can be infinite if you want it to be. So once that's done, this page is now no longer useful to us. But if we go back to our ChatGPT session, it says, hey, okay, that was good, so now you're logged in, but you can also use something like AWS Vault exec against a profile name, and then it really depends on what your profile is. Well, I already set a profile. If I look at my AWS profile value, I'm already using the Cumulus admin profile, and that's actually where it got this path, was from that profile. If I look at my AWS config, you can see that I have a couple different profiles. I have one that has administrator access, one that has power user access, and I've got another profile, which was a different one that was generated for me. But the Cumulus admin profile has the start URL, and that's the same as is my SSO account. And then it's just a matter of being able to log into that environment. So great, so I've proven that AWS works, but now the question is, and how do I make sure that I can also run Terraform, right? So why don't we go ahead and ask the Oracle? Actually, it suggests that once we've proven that we have access, that we run something like AWS S3 list, S3 ls. Oh, I bet my alias doesn't include the profile. All right, so still not quite there. So I export the profile, but I don't add it here, do I? Okay, so we're going to -E AWS profile. And actually, before we quit that, we're going to just go copy this whole thing. Okay, so then now let's try. All right. So yeah, by exporting the profile, which I'd forgotten to do for this particular script otherwise, we actually get to a functioning AWS. So we can now do AWS S3. Let's see, what is it? It's create bucket, and then we can call it Cumulus test bucket. No, it's not CB, it's MB. And then we have to do S3. Okay, and then now if we do AWS S3 LS, so we have a bucket, and then we can also do, let's see, RB, I believe, is remove bucket. RB. All right. Now if we look, good, system's clear. And this pattern is exactly the pattern that we want to automate. Create it, test for its state, test that it's functionally working, and then delete it when we're done with it. All right, that's the normal flow of all cloud-centric automation and operations. So yeah, this is kind of the first step of this. So we know we can talk to AWS. The next thing is, let's see if the Oracle can't tell us how to launch a container. So AWS SSO with AWS Vault, we'll create a new chat, because I think, we have AWS working. We can just take that as a given, and we can say, how would I set up an environment to be able to run Terraform, to create an ECS container that can pull from the gitlab.com container registry. So let's see. I mean, here we get the instructions, but obviously the instructions are now something that we have to go and execute against. And this is really the current flow with ChatGPT. It's conversational, right? So if you're asking it to create you an essay, you're going to converse with that essay system and go back and forth. And how do I do this? And what can I do with it? And why would I do it this way? Or why would I do it that way? So, it says, how do you install Terraform? Well, it turns out we have Terraform installed because we're using this container. If I do Terraform it's actually going to complain and say, I don't have any configuration files to initialize anything, right? But I think I did actually create, no, I didn't. So we're actually going to do make dir Terraform, and main.tf. And let's see, what would a basic Terraform, something like main.tf look like to talk to AWS in the US East 1 region. Now, this is the other thing. It's really good if you know a little bit about the environment that you're trying to work with. This certainly makes life just so much easier. So yeah, here it's like, here you go. Here's a little thing that can talk to US East 1. So we need to have a provider, so we can add that in here, right? And then if we do Terraform init now, it should say, oh, okay, I can handle that. I can do the basics of AWS, and I can find the HashiCorp AWS provider. I can install that resource, and then I can go ahead and work from that baseline system. So this is actually, a really important aspect of this, is understanding that these pieces are there, and it will give you as much information as you know to ask it, and it will give you instructions. It'll tell you the sorts of steps that you need to do, but often you need to go back around and sort of work through it, right? So install Terraform, configure AWS. So we've basically validated both of these. IAM user with the required permissions. This was done well before this system. I've had an IAM credential for a while, but again, there's this administrator view and there's a power user view, and both of those are probably adequate for most of the things that you would want to do. So then what we can do says, hey, you need to create an ECS cluster and task definition. So we can use the Terraform AWS ECS provider. That's great. Let's go ahead and do that. And you need to define a task definition with a container registry URL for gitlab.com. And then we need to create a service. So these are effectively the two major steps that we're going to now see if we can get the system to help us with, because we know that we can talk to the system. We know that we have the right credentials and configuration, and can we actually go ahead and launch this? And it does kind of keep helping you to do certain things. Like here, when I just said, hey, how can I validate that I can talk to US East 1? Here's a provider. Actually, what we can do, since we were using the S3 bucket thing, we can say, how would I extend, or how would I create an S3 bucket in US East 1 with Terraform if I have Terraform installed and can talk to AWS with the appropriate already configured credentials. Oh, we can do one better. Create an S3 bucket and add a simple index.html file for a static website. There, we can make it even a little bit more complicated. So here's where it goes, and it says, okay, look, here's your Terraform, right? It didn't give me an index file. Oh man. So here's a main.tf. So this is going to create a bucket, calling it example website bucket, and it's publicly readable. We're going to have to figure out how to get the path to that bucket, aren't we? Oh, yeah, actually, no, S3 website region. And okay, so there's a default name for this even. So we can try this. Oh, did it give us an index? Oh, it generated an index. Oh my gosh. Look at that. It said, hey, here's the file and the content. How about, let's see, how would we modify the Terraform to read the index HTML from local disk. Here we go. Okay, so then it's, instead of defining the content, we would do content file. So let's go ahead and try this. I mean, that's the whole point, right? So we're going to copy this code, main.tf. And see, it gives you the provider again, because it's basically trying to give you a complete document. And the thing that we wanted to do was change our content from content. And it said, instead of content as it was defined, change that to file index.html. So we can go ahead here and say this. Okay, now we also have to create an index.html. And so we'll go ahead and create. Actually, I'm going to copy one. Let's see, it was templates. We're going to get rid of a bunch of this, but I just really want to capture the CSS bootstrap so that it has some nice looking data here. And we're just gonna, I know it doesn't know how to send it back to itself because that's just the way it works, but that's okay. So if we do terraform init again, just to make sure that we have a current initialization. Okay, and it's actually still happy with that. So it's basically saying, I'm initialized, I have all the things I need. And then we can do terraform plan. Now I tend to include an out, so we're gonna call s3.tf plan, even though the instructions here. So what this said was, hey, you just have to run plan, where was it here? All right, so once you create your terraform, then you do terraform init, terraform plan, and terraform apply. Well, I know it's better practice to actually create a plan file and then apply that plan file. That way, if things are changing underneath you, so while you're planning a configuration, if something is changing and then you try to apply it, the system will find those differences and will say, oh, okay, this is not what we were expecting, but is still good enough to know how the pieces are supposed to fit together. And here's where we find that, what did I do wrong? To use SSO, missing required configuration. Okay. Oh, well, guess what? Terraform is also an alias and also has the need to pass in this AWS credential. So we're going to, once again, edit our ZSHRC. We're going to go find that -E. We're going to yank this. I'm going to add it in here. Okay, we're going to grab this alias. And we're going to redo that alias. And now we're going to try again. So what happened was it doesn't like some of what's going on here. So one thing we can do, we have a deprecation warning. And I always figure if you can fix it, better fix it now rather than later. But we're going to let it try to do a plan, and we're going to see if it works just out of the box. And then what we're going to do is we're going to see if Terraform can help us clean this up. All right, so actually at this point, even though this is deprecated, even though this is not the right way to go about doing this, it said, I think that's okay. I know what resources I have and what I would need to go do. So let's try it, right? Let's see if this plan will actually work. And then we can see if the website actually shows up based on the configuration as defined. Now, I know that there were some S3 configurations that have changed over time, but my assumption is that this will actually create a website bucket. And yep, it still says it's deprecated, but it's like, yeah, we can deal with this. We'll give it a shot. So then what did we get as a result here? So we need to say bucket name region. So actually, since I did this first, this is an interesting thing about S3. S3 does not have guarantees of unique names. So you have to make sure that the bucket name for you is unique. If we do this, it looks like we get, no, not enabled. F403 forbidden, access denied. Okay. And this is the real trick. How do I enable public access and visibility to the S3 website that was created? I got an error. To enable public, this is what you have to do. Okay, so we have to change the bucket policy. Website policy, bucket ID. So we're going to copy this code. We're going to go here, paste in the code. And the other thing we're going to do, just for good measure, first we're going to destroy the current configuration. There's two approaches. I can replan. Actually, that's what we'll do first. Just leaving it as it stands, we're going to create a new plan. Just going to reuse the old plan file because that's basically useless after the application is done. So create a new plan. It's still going to complain about that deprecation, and we're going to fix that next, assuming that this works. And actually, we'll go ahead and open the page here in the browser. We should still get a 403. Yeah, okay. All right, and then we can just go back to our previous apply. So apply this. So it said that it needed to make a change. So we're going to change AWS S3 bucket to, okay. All right, so that's been updated, and lo and behold, suddenly it works. And this is really the power of Terraform. So I'm going to go ahead and tear this down. Let's see, apply, destroy, auto, approve. Flag provisioned but not to Terraform destroy. I thought it was just destroy and auto approve, but anyway, this is the alternate way of going about this. So destroy basically does apply, and then it does an unapply. Right, so it figures out how it went and applied the things and what additional things had to be created. That's the power of something like Terraform. The other one that I'm looking at is Pulumi recently as another possible option for doing this sort of thing. But see here, now I'm going through and I'm removing all of these resources. And of course it's saying, these are the resources that would have to go away. Do you want to do this? And I'm going to say yes. And so once that's done, just for completeness here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to see if we can't fix this. So we're going to ask, okay. So what we're going to say is, hey, can I replace the AWS S3, I copied it here, for the website bucket resource with this one, and instead, and it's thinking, it's saying, okay, wait, where did I put it here? Yes, you can do this, and this is how you would do it. Open the file main and replace bucket with the following website configuration resource block. Okay, so we need both an index and an error file, it looks like. So let's go ahead and fix this first. So this says replace S3 bucket with S3 bucket website configuration. Okay, we can do that. S3 bucket, and we can you know what I'm going to do is, no, how would you know? S, put at the beginning, comments. We're just going to comment that one out. Okay, so this is the resource it says, and we're going to want another thing, which is we're going to create another object here. Okay, so now we have an index, and we're going to say error. Okay. And we're going to make this simple. And we can say error. You can leave all that. we're just going to change this here. And instead of label, I just want, okay, H2. I don't know, I'm just making this stuff up. Actually, isn't there a... guess I don't have to add a class. I can just say H2. And then we can get rid of this. Actually, we can even get rid of the form. Get rid of this. We can get rid of all of the script because we don't need any of that, so that makes this page load faster. All right, so there, now we have a simple error page, which is a little nicer than your completely boring error page, but really not that much different. So we have those two files, they're defined in this website bucket. Okay, and then everything else still is the same. We were also going to look at changing that from bucket, we're going to call this Cumulus website bucket, or actually we're going to call this GPT. Okay, we have our index and we have our error, so plan so s3.tf plan. Oh, not dash o, dash out. And we'll see if it likes this. Did we get our form right? And you know, I extended what the system did by adding my own error file and also changing the name. So I've already started to tweak the system, and it says no. Oh, okay. Oh, that's right. The policy. It looks like there's a bunch of things here. Well, let's ask. Got an error for the index and error documents. Can I resolve this? Okay. Index, suffix, and error key. Well, let's try it, right? Okay, the other thing it's going to complain about here is the policy document. So we can say, how do I change the S3 bucket C2 point to the new AWS, what's this thing here? Resource. Okay, so this should just be a replacement of the policy that exists. And I'm going to do what I did before, which is just comment this out. And then we'll add in this one. And we'll play. So while this is running, I mean, obviously, if there's anybody that's watching that's interested, I'm happy to answer questions or take suggestions of things that we can try. The whole point here is this is something that I'm doing, and if there's value to all of you out there, then maybe you can ask questions, and we can either do another session at some point, or you know, if you happen to do it while I'm here live, that's great too. Go ahead and ask as you have a chance. Yeah, so well, we still have references to the website bucket ID. So this is something that yeah. So it still does not like this. So this is where ChatGPT to me fails. Clearly, it has an idea of what it should be, but it doesn't seem to actually know the format for an S3 bucket. We also have to go in and find all of the bucket configurations and change them all to this format. Okay. So that's one thing that we definitely have to change. I'm wondering if it's actually supposed to be bucket instead of bucket.id. Well, we'll give this a shot. It's still going to complain, but let's see if it gets any closer to at least saying, oh yeah, I see where that resource is trying to come from. Okay. Oh. Also, this is even different. Index document, error document, routing rules. But I'm not sure this is right, so Terraform AWS provider. So I think this is all we need. know that we necessarily need any routing rules. Let's see if it likes that now. Street bucket object index. Well, so we'll try this because deprecated is something that it should still handle, but let's see what it says about this. And actually, before we do that, we're going to do a little bit of feedback here. The index document format is more complicated than what was returned, where index and error, what the heck were they called? All right, well, I gave them some feedback. It's not immediately being applied, unfortunately, because these are just not going to work, right, as we've just seen. But then we can actually at least go ahead with this. So let's see what it's got to say about that. Okay, well, let's try this, shall we? So we're going to keep our bucket, and then we just want this resource. So and we're looking for website policy. How about this? Or does it still want to throw up? So what's interesting is that the deprecated version did work. The very first version that we got did work, but I just think it's better to do this right. There has no argument, nested block or exported attribute named bucket domain name. Yeah. Let's see what it says about this one. And basically, we're sitting here training this algorithm. which is kind of funny, but hey, if it works, it works. Website endpoint attribute instead of bucket domain name. Okay. Let's see, shall we? At some point, we might just get some attributes, or get some error, some deprecation warnings, which are fine. Aha! All right, let's see if we can't fix. I mean, I just figure while we're here, argument is deprecated. Okay, so we can try this, but we're already gonna have to change the bucket because that's not that bucket. The bucket is different, right? So main.tf. So let's go ahead and come on up in here. Wait, that's what we have. S3. Oh, bucket object. I see. S3 object instead. So it wants that one. But this is the other thing that we want. We want this guy. Okay. All right, so now we have an index object, we have an error object, we have our document here. I wonder if the source needs to be this file style instead of well, let's give it a shot, see what it does. Plan it, see if it likes it or doesn't like it. Because it'll go through and try to figure out how it would actually apply that configuration. The big question, of course, is there actually a file that maps to those things? Well, we have those two files. They're on the local file system. So it says it's happy, so let's give it a shot. again, this is the process. This is how you use ChatGPT to do this. But the key is that you start getting all of these things managed through Terraform. That's step one. The next thing to do after we get this working, we still haven't gotten to the point of actually launching our container. That's a secondary process. I just wanted to make sure that this was working and was clean, because it's effectively the same thing. But in this case, right now we're still applying Terraform manually. The next step really is to set this up in something like GitLab CI or GitHub Actions or Amazon Code, whichever code variant it is for Amazon, and get the system up and running that way. So this is good. Look, it's creating a bucket, which shouldn't take that long, but it does whatever it does. Sometimes Amazon takes longer than others. And hopefully once it has that bucket created, it'll create the resources, both index and error resources that it felt like it needed. And then we should be able to open that page again. And actually what we can do, see, so now we're going to ask, well, I was thinking about it, is like you could give me a little output, which is exactly what I was looking for here. So this way it'll tell us what the actual URL is instead of us having to figure it out and guess. Now, it doesn't usually take this long to create a bucket in my mind, but there's something else going on perhaps. No such bucket. The specified bucket does not exist. Yes, we'll ask you to create it. Okay. What did we call it here? Oh, did I change it there? Yeah, I did. Okay, we're going to do this. Get an output, and then what does it think we should do here? Example bucket. S3 object for index. Website configuration, website bucket. Okay, so this seems a little We'll grab this again. Okay, so I have that. All right, let's see if that's enough. Oh no, I don't want to do that. Create a new plan. Start there and see what it complains about this time. So now it's complaining about the output. But I think that's because it's effectively the old version of this. It's kind of interesting sort of going through this loop of trying to figure out, you know, what it thought versus what it actually meant. See if it likes that. Oh, much better. So let's see if we can now get an actual website generated out of this. Slowly but surely the pieces come together. Again, the eventual steps that you want to do with something like this is to start putting it into an environment where you have a runtime state. You can interact with some of the different interfaces and really just start to build out more and more of the platform in an automated fashion. And look, this time it actually was able to go through and run everything. And it says our endpoint should be this. So let's see if that endpoint exists and if we're allowed to talk to it. Chances? Haha. Oh, no, thinking. Oh yeah, there we go. Now this doesn't do anything because there's no back end, but that's okay. And empty response was copied. Hey. So that's actually, to me, that's huge progress, because there were no deprecation warnings. This is code that to me is solid, good, proper code. Now, if you were to recreate this, you wouldn't want to use this same bucket name necessarily, at least if I have it. But the other reason that we go around trying to get these systems built like this is the inverse, right? So for one, I can continue to change. I can continue, once I have this working, now I can change it by adding additional documents. So for example, if I wanted to add another file, I could add a sub file that the index points at, and I could just create that as a resource here in the same way that I created the index and the error page. Those are fine. And actually, I think the error page will show up if we try something like, actually, can I just get that one back? So if we try to go to a route, right, docs was something that was an example, this should come back with an error. Oh, site can't be reached. Should have given me this page. Oh, I downloaded error. Yeah, so there's still some bits and pieces that are not configured right in terms of this being a website. But the point here was really to sort of start to leverage the resources and model of the chat environment. And within an hour we were able to use ChatGPT and fine-tune the system and do the debug. And as you saw, this was not 100% ChatGPT. There were definitely times when it was easier to go back to the Google way effectively and say, okay, tell me what the default should be for this, because that was sort of a gap in what ChatGPT was giving us as an output. And the one other thing that we can do here is we did this all with the 3.5 model. So, just as an example, we can go and try this with 4. 25 messages every 3 hours. So can you create a Terraform model, simple index page based website in S3 with a policy for public access and an output of the default website URL. So you can see this is much slower, but let's see what it does. So it's picked a different region. I don't know why. I've actually noticed this before, that ChatGPT 4 does things in region 4 instead of, or US West 2 instead of US East 1. So what say ye? Shall we try this? Bucket website index resource. No, was it S3 bucket object? In other words, is this the same as the previous one? Main.tf. So let's see. So we had a bucket. AWS object. So yeah, it suggested that we go to AWS object instead of bucket object, because this was the old version of this. And then the policy is against the bucket configuration, website configuration. So we don't have the website configuration here, do we? No. But that's okay. Website domain. S3 bucket website index. Yeah, so I think that this is equivalent to what we started with before. So in this case, ChatGPT 4, GPT-4 versus GPT 3.5 is really no different for our particular use case. But this is good. So now we have the ability to generate an index page. And actually, I'm going to take a break, but I'll come back in a few hours, and I'll post again that we're doing this in case people happen to see it. But we're going to... I need to take a break after talking for an hour, so let's see. We'll be back around, let's just 6:30. All right, and I'm going to go back to, let's see here. All right. All right, folks. I'm back here, and we're going to try to get back into looking at how we can actually get our ECS container up and running. So I'm going to switch back to the display view. So we've been asking ChatGPT a couple of things, and we asked Model 4, but we're going to ask a new one again and basically go back to this Terraform for ECS idea. And we'll stick with the default model, since even though it didn't necessarily get it all right, it got us close. And that's really the value here, is of course getting us close to right. So we know we have our Terraform environment up. We know we have our AWS environment. We can talk to it. We have a GitLab environment, which we haven't really talked about, but there's a container registry where there's a container for a Flask Bootstrap app, and that's the one that was behind this particular application that we're trying to get up and running. Now, there are a couple of tasks that we're going to have to accomplish. One is, how do we add a secret to the AWS environment so that it can use our API key again without me having to store that somewhere insecure, for example, in a file system, or worst case scenario, a Git repository. That would be really silly. So we do want to figure out how we can actually handle the secret and the API key in this configuration. We have an environment variable that the system knows to look for and actually expects to find in order to read that. So that's part of the application itself. And maybe it makes sense at this point to have a quick look at the application. So it's a Flask app, and it looks to basically it has a route for both get, so the index lookup, and for post, so you can post your message to it and it'll get the data back from that post response. And I mean, it's a really pretty simple thing, but again, it does need an OpenAI API key, and so it's going to grab that using the OS getEnv environment variable lookup. There are other ways that we could acquire this as well. We could write it to a file and read it from a file, but this is the fairly common sort of default-ish way of doing this, so we'll stick with that for now. Anyway, beyond that, it's using the API. There's some default API configuration. I've noticed that ChatGPT itself sometimes gets the engine to use wrong. I've seen Text DaVinci, and in this case, Text DaVinci 2 works, but Text DaVinci doesn't work, and some of the other configurations that I've tried in the past have given me interesting ways of trying to talk to the system. But this code I know works, and so that's fine. So now the real question is, again, more from an infrastructure automation perspective, how do I get this thing deployed? How do I get it so that you all could hit it and burn my credits, I guess, with ChatGPT for the time that I have it online? And the reason that I want to do something like this is, again, if I have the ability, for example, to enable all of my end users to, when they do a git commit, basically take their commit message and the commit data, the diff for their git commit, and send that to an AI-driven automation to enhance that resource. Well, that's actually kind of important. That really actually helps, because then I get a better understanding of what is going on with this particular resource. Sorry, I just needed to refresh a page and see if it was still active. Oh yeah, I guess it's back online. Sorry, it seemed like the connection had somehow timed out. All right, so I think we're sort of back into thinking about this again. So we're going to go back into our Terraform space, and actually, what I'm going to do is first off, I need to add a git ignore file. I want to put in Terraform terraform.tf state. So we're going to do that. Terraform.tf state. And then we also want to .terraform. No, yeah, and actually the lock file as well. Okay, so the state files, I guess we could also probably exclude tf plan. I'll do that because that's a file I often use. because we don't want to store the plans either. Those are intermediate files. All right, so if we do a git status here, we see that we have git ignore that's needed. Run.shell was modified because I have a remote container that I can use. And then, of course, there's stuff here. So if we add this, all right, so I thought I said don't. So we do git restore stage.terraform. All right, so now I have a reasonable baseline file and directory. So we can add these. Actually, we want to do a branch. And we're going to call it S3 website. And basic Terraform website. And we called it S3 website. All right. All right, so we've updated the remote with a website model, and now we can basically go back to a cleaner state. Check out main. Did I destroy those resources? Yeah, I did not. And this is where you suddenly realize that you wish you had kept that directory instead of just deleting it. But it is what it is. There really are two things. There was a policy document that we created, right? And we can actually go back and look at the chat results. This was the GPT-4. So we have a bucket policy that we want to clean up, and then a bucket, and then the resources within that bucket. And that's it. So this is actually another area where the AWS Vault tool becomes very useful, because we can log into the Cumulus admin account, and that will, as we allow it. Oh, we haven't created a password here. That's just a local password, so that's okay. Okay, and we want to go into S3. Okay, and we want to say delete. I don't know if it'll let me do it because bucket is not empty. Okay. I always find it so funny that it's like you have to do it exactly with this call. Okay, and looks like that much is happy, and it's deleting that. And so then what we want to do is buckets. Where's bucket policy defined? S3 bucket policy. Oh, I think it's a policy on the bucket, so maybe that's actually gone as well. Yeah, because I don't have, well, it's thinking about it. Permissions, access public, yeah. Anyway, so we have no buckets left. Buckets. Pending. Oh, I see. I can now delete the bucket. All right. So clean up those resources. That's important in its own right. The website now is no longer at present. Specified bucket does not exist. Good. Okay. Very good. So all that is cleaned up and gone. We have our container registry. We can go back to here and we can get back into Terraform for ECS. All right. So what we want to now do is say, wait, Terraform for ECS. Oh, I think did I hijack this one? I guess I must have. Yeah. All right, so we want to go back to these steps. So we want to create an ECS cluster and a task definition, and we want to create an ECS service. So we're going to do new chats. How you create an ECS, let's see, Terraform description of an ECS on Fargate and AWS. Launch a Docker container from the boom. It says, of course I can. What's wrong with you? This is easy. So we need a subnet and a security group. Update the Terraform to use the VPC to use, let's see, US East 1 and the VPC, the default VPC subnet and security group that are all tagged with the name see. Okay, so we're going to copy this. I'm going to go into the new Terraform. Before we do anything, we're going to create a new branch. Check out. So we're going to call it ECS. checkout -b, new branch, ECS Terraform. Okay, and then we're going to do git push su origin ECS Terraform. So this way I've just registered this branch with the upstream git repository. Okay, and if we edit, so there's nothing here, so we can main.tf, save that, check out S3 I've forgotten how to do this sometimes. Let's see. How do I? Come on, wake up. I check out a file from a different branch in Git from the command line. That's what I thought. I just didn't complete it. Git branch. Git checkout S3. Oh, I know, I don't have completion working. Okay, yeah. So git checkout S3 website, and I want .git ignore. That's good. Okay. Just so that we don't end up inadvertently capturing Terraform state, which I find very difficult to sometimes deal with, as we just saw earlier. So now we have this Terraform init. So it's really, it has to download the files again because we deleted the directory, but you could actually, if it made sense, you could actually keep the resources around. That certainly is a viable approach. Okay, all right, there we go. Initialized, and then we can do Terraform plan out, and we're going to call this ECS.tf plan. Again, that name can be anything, but you probably want to include the fact that it's Terraform-ish, but you don't want to leave it as a .tf file because Terraform will then try to read that, and the TF plan format has got nothing to do with the Terraform source code format. All right, so it says, there's no EC2 security group called named default. Okay. Okay, so we need to have it create a security group for us. So we're going to go back here. Okay. I think all we have to do is add this one in. All right. And now default subnets and data is being deprecated. Okay, so let's get out of the deprecated resource. All right, let's see if this works. We're just going to replace this file now. Let's see. I think this looks actually better. Kind of interesting. Let's see if it likes that. Okay, so try this one. If it likes this, we still have to change the target for our GitLab container. And then I think the other thing we have to do is we have to add a service on top of this. So basically we're creating an ACS cluster, and then on top of the cluster you have to define the load balancing thing. AWS subnets. I think we were here before. I think we're just going to leave it with the deprecated resource. But first we need to look at the container. So, task definition. We're going to call it Flask Bootstrap. And then the name here is going to be this. Okay, port mappings. Yep, port 80 is great. ECS service. Oh, it has a service. Okay. So and the Terraform to expose the service on the public internet, And can you add output for the default public DNS name for the service is exposed? Let's see what it says. Seems to think it would happily do that. Does it have an output? No. All right, this looks more complete. So again, we're going to replace the entire thing here. Copied code. Actually, so here we've accepted the basic plan. I just want to basically commit that version of the file because then I can remove it. All right, we'll see what it likes or doesn't like about this plan. Cannot be longer than 6 characters. Yes, that would be target group. Well, let's just see if there we go. Now it made it ECSTG. Oh, and again, it didn't finish. Okay, that looks more complete. So we'll go ahead and copy this one again. The rough path, right? Goes tech pub. Let's do it this way. All right, come on, fingers crossed. clearly a much more complex plan. All right, that looks good. So it's going to add 7 things. So I guess we'll go ahead and plan this. All right, so looks like it's created the services and the sources. That's good. Creating the load balancing group. It's creating the cluster. Actually, that took 12 seconds, so that's not too bad. Load balancers seem to always take a long time at Amazon, but that's because it's actually configuring to some extent a little bit of hardware, if nothing else. So we'll see what it comes back with here. So that might take a minute or two. And then I think we should have a running container, which will be really interesting to see. Of course, then the question is, how do I get my key into the system? So I'm going to have to ask it how to get a secret installed in AWS, and then how to use that secret to create a config, basically a environment variable for the container, at which point it should actually be able to talk to the API, which is great, because that's really what we're trying to get to, is the point where this is actually running in quote-unquote production. It's actually really kind of interesting to see how the pieces fit together, because here the build process happened all outside of Amazon. And eventually we could also do this in Amazon. That's just as easy in a way. But I happen to have access to GitLab already set up, and so that's what I figured I would go and use for this particular configuration. And then once this is up and running, we have a running application. It's really not that hard. But as you can see, the ChatGPT interface, it actually works. You copy and paste the code back and forth. There are some extensions for things like VS Code and some of the other services like that. But really, it is sort of an iterative process. And here, my container does not exist in the task definition. Oh no, I broke the task definition. My container. Okay, well, so I made a change. So we redo the plan. And then we rerun the apply, and it should keep all the services that are already deployed. So everything that's been deployed to this point, it was trying to set up the listener. So the application load balancer, ALB, was already up and running. It took it, like I said, about 2 minutes. Seems to be pretty much par for the course. So it should now say it still has a couple things to create, one thing to create. Okay, that's good. So we'll go ahead and run the plan, or run the apply against our plan. And now, since it should be looking for the Flask-BS container instead of the, I guess I should call that Bootstrap, but instead of the my container, it should, okay, my service, the provided target group has the target IP. All right, well, this is a real error. This is a tell me what you think error. I don't know why it keeps getting stuck like that. Okay, and so what was its comment? Okay. Copy code. And this time I'll just change this. Okay. Okay. So again, we're changing the plan because we changed the Terraform. So it's going to rebuild the plan, and the plan will compare it to the resources that already exist within the system. So let's see how that works. And it may actually say, oh, I need to remove a resource. Yeah, so one resource needs to be destroyed, which is the container that I deleted the name of and changed to a new one, right? So it's going to see task definition must be replaced because I changed the name. Yep, I completely agree with you, so please do that. And so now I go ahead and apply the plan. So it'll recreate the ECS resource, and then hopefully it will be able to update the application load balancer, the target group that it has. Bridge network mode specified in the task definition. I have to get to do it again. ECS task definition. Okay, so here's the task. Okay, so I think all we have to do is add this one line. At least we can try that. Everything else looks reasonably similar. I'm going to do that, but I'm going to just see if we can't. Run the plan again. Okay, good. Okay. So now we'll see if this plan works. If this change for the resource type, okay. Yep, same thing. So go ahead and run this again. So do our apply. And see if we can get this up and running. Like I said, the follow-on to this is going to be how do we add a secret for a command line parameter. That's interesting because I think we initially asked for Fargate, so I think it got half of the configuration. Maybe I didn't ask for Fargate, but I should have. I'm assuming now that this is the thing that's changed. So I'm just going to grab this and see if this will work. I'll ask it to regenerate it again. No, I guess I really can't. Uh-oh. I am. Let's see if that's all that was missing. Okay, we're back to just the deprecated address schema. like it's getting worse every time. You know what we could try is changing the network configuration too. Yeah, actually this is a very different, let's see if it likes that, because it looks like this is maybe, you know, we had this. I believe that's still all the same. Registry, yeah, okay. Let's try the plan again. So let's change the service up quite a bit, and I think it maybe missed that part of the configuration. What I find interesting is that it doesn't actually capture the error relative to the planning process, but only when it actually tries to implement that particular service. So it doesn't actually have the smarts to know the different data types, which I guess makes sense. How would it get that? All it knows is parameters that go in as inputs. Again, this is the joy of ChatGPT. Oh, it created the service. And it says that we should be accessible at some point. I don't know if that's right away. Well, the ALB's been up for a while, so I'll give it a shot. Maybe, maybe not. Oh, we still have something pending. Pending 0, running 1 desired. So let's see, logs. Configuration and tasks. Oh, this is trying to do code pipeline. Yeah, so this would be the other thing, is that we might actually have to store the container in an AWS container registry, or we have to do some other configuration. Task started a couple minutes ago. And really, I don't think this should take this long, so I'm concerned that it's the registry. But that should be public. We can try something here real quick. Docker pull this image. Yeah, that looks fine to me, so yeah, there are no targets because it remains in pending mode. Okay, well, we'll give this a couple minutes and see how it works. It should start, even if it doesn't actually work because the API key is missing. It should at least still start. I hope I didn't get that wrong. Yes, it's still the same thing. So okay, that's the right file. Yeah, we can add an environment variable. So that's what we'll have to do from a secret. Task. Oh, excuse me. Let's see here. So we'll do this real quick. So we'll run the plan again. And then we'll apply. So this should just change the task definition. And there was another thing that we were thinking about adding to the task definition, which was the, let's see. I mean, this has gotten its configuration. It's active. It's running. It's got the bits and pieces. It's just, it's very strange that it doesn't bind. Well, I would say this is now deep into the weeds of what we were trying to accomplish. But you can see that, ChatGPT can at least get you a long way. We have a service, we have a load balancer, we have an interface, we have an IP address, we have the container defined. Although, even though this looks to me like a public registry, I'm wondering if maybe there's something that it's not letting it pull. Image URI. I mean, this is like, I request this. I'm wondering if I have that wrong. I don't think so, though. Container registry. I mean, the Docker side of the system works, right? So if we do Docker pull this image, it's like, yeah, I can do that. I already have a copy of that. So So that part's working. Cannot pull a container. Here we go. Registry GitLab com. Oh. Okay, so it looks like maybe we do actually have to establish a container registry credential. All right, well, I think this is for next time. We've really covered quite a bit, and I do think we'll have a follow-up. I'd say thanks for everybody's time, for those that were able to join. I know we didn't get really any comments other than mine, but I'll leave a comment here just in case somebody watches with comments on. And again, thank you so much for your time. Like, subscribe, comment. If there's something else that we want to discuss or you would like me to jump in on, go ahead and leave a comment in the chat below. And again, don't forget to subscribe. Our main channel is Cumulus Technologies, at Cumulus Technologies on YouTube. And we're looking forward to talking to you more about these technologies and sort of how how the world is changing in terms of trying to implement new technologies using things like ChatGPT. And you can see it can help, but it certainly doesn't fix all the problems. But again, it's a very powerful tool set to be able to leverage and to understand how to leverage. So again, thanks for your time, and we'll talk to you next time.